On the 4th of July 1946, a 22-year-old woman was led out onto the gallows in front of a crowd of around 20,000 people within the city of Gdansk. She had been sentenced to death by a Polish court and was one of a number of female guards who worked at the Stutthof concentration camp. Elisabeth Becker was one of the youngest women that day who were hanged on the gallows, and one of the youngest female guards who were executed after the Second World War. But why did this happen, and why specifically was she executed in public? Elisabeth Becker was born inside of Gdansk, and she was an ethnic German. When she was a teenager, she joined the League of German Girls, a Nazi youth group that young women spent a lot of time each week being a part of. This was of course not a normal youth group. The teenage girls were brainwashed and indoctrinated into the Nazi policies and the Nazi ideology, and they were told to have as many children for the Reich as they could, so Hitler could have as big an empire as possible. Elisabeth Becker had a relatively normal early teenage life. She obtained a job on the trams in the city, and after this she sought work as an agricultural assistant. However, at the time, the Second World War was raging on, and in the local area, the SS, the Stutthof, were looking to fill gaps in the local concentration camp of Stutthof. Here they were recruiting specifically female guards who wanted to seek better pay and promotion, and Elisabeth answered the call, and she was in 1944 specifically called up to work there. She trained there as an SS Aufseherin, and quickly she became known for cruelty and brutal acts. Despite only working inside the camp for a number of months, probably about 4 or 5 months, and as she tried to escape in January 1945, she did gain a rather fearsome reputation. She was known to have sent at least 30 female prisoners to be gassed inside the small gas chamber at Stutthof. These women, who were deemed not fit enough to work, were punished in this horrible way, and Elisabeth Becker was the one who specifically chose which women should die. She admitted to doing this herself, but would later retract this confession. At the end of the war, Elisabeth Becker was arrested, and she was then seized as a notorious female guard, and she was sentenced to death at the first Stutthof trials. Specifically, she tried to appeal to the Polish president at the time, so her death sentence could be commuted, but the court even recommended that she should have had her sentence commuted to 15 years imprisonment. Out of the other guards who were tried, Becker's actions were not as severe and as widespread as others, and she also worked in the camp the shortest time too. But no pardon was issued, and on the 4th of July 1946, she was brought out for her public execution on Biskupia Gorka Hill. Gathered was a crowd of thousands, and the gallows were deliberately made huge to allow everyone to get a good view of the proceedings. But why specifically was Elisabeth Becker publicly hanged? Poland had suffered greatly during the war, and there was a deliberate need to make the Polish people who had survived the evils of the Nazi regime see that justice was being enacted. By executing some of the local collaborators and evil guards, the people of Gdansk could not deny that justice had not taken place. It was a powerful moment that had brought some form of closure for some who were there that day, and even the executioner who secured the noose around the neck of Elisabeth Becker was a former concentration camp prisoner whom she had overseen. The specific execution method of hanging was also deliberately chosen to ensure that death took some time. It was the chosen method for war criminals' executions in Poland, but specifically the guards of Stutthof did not die a quick death. There was no drop that ensured their necks were snapped. As they were helped onto the back of a truck, and as a noose was secured around their necks, after the truck was told to drive off, they were left suspended by their necks for many minutes, and they kicked and struggled as life and breath was slowly strangled out of them. Minutes later, their bodies went limp, and sometime after, death was confirmed. This method was all very public and visible, and the vengeful crowd, shockingly and sadistically, enjoyed seeing these pains of death. So Elisabeth Becker was only 22 years old when she was executed in Gdansk in public. She was one of the condemned female guards of Stutthof, and was one of the 5 executed that day on the huge gallows inside of her hometown. Thanks for watching. If you did find this video interesting, maybe click subscribe. Once again, thank you so much for watching one of these videos.